Are you listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other platform where you can leave a rate or review? Do you like what we're doing? If the answer to all of that is yes, please consider quickly giving us a 5-star rate. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a nice review, we greatly appreciate that as well. Okay, let's do this.
Hello, welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 283 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 11 of A Dance with Dragons, that's Daenerys 2.
And as always, we'll chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. Unless, of course, you have a Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tier that includes spoilers, then we are going to spoil things for you. And regardless, we're going to spoil things for Simon, and hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes that provide some additional information about the characters' geography of this chapter. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. It's the eve of the Masters golf tournament, so that's exciting for me. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year.
I think the only thing stopping me from winning the US Masters is my allergies. I think it was...
Yes, that's what it is. The fact that you called it the US Masters shows no lack of...
Did I call it the US? I thought I called it the Masters. Okay, well, yes.
That too.
I know that it's very pretty. It's
yes,
Augusta, right?
Yes, a lot of azaleas in bloom at that time of year.
The azaleas are beautiful
Georgia.
Here now.
They are.
I keep thinking my mother and my family should come visit at this time of year because it's still cold and miserable where they are.
Right. But right now we've got all the pollen. The yellow
pollen is the kicker.
Pollen.
That is the downside.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm doing all right. But based on what we have here in the notes, I'm not sure you are. It looks like some scary things going on here.
So I took a fall the other day. Now, there's an age, which I believe I've crossed the cusp, where you go from I fell to I took a fall.
Right. Yes.
I took a fall. So we have a 6-foot-long foam roller. You know
I know
the concept. Okay. So for those who don't know, the diameter is maybe like 6 inches or 15 centimeters, something like that. And the idea is you lean on it in various positions and roll it, and it's supposed to squeeze the muscles and make them feel better, sort of thing.
Right.
That thing kicks around our living room all the time, and it's a death trap. I mean, it's literally a death trap, this thing.
Weirdly, every time you come into a room, it's positioned directly in the doorway.
Well, they finally found the position because it was wedged so that it was sticking out from the coffee table, but it was up against the leg of the coffee table.
Oh.
And then I say someone like anybody, but Carson does the laundry. Carson had brought in a basket of laundry and had positioned it so that it was now wedged so that it was now between the laundry and the table, but only at one end. So the thing could swing like the arm of a clock, but it was pinned at the other end. So it had like an axis. I stood up from the couch and I caught it with my foot and I was stumbling, but I was going to survive. I was not going to fall over, except the thing is a roller. It's cylindrical in shape.
Right.
So when I kicked it, it rolled, and it rolled to exactly the position where I needed to put my foot down to prevent myself from falling.
So, you kicked it right under your other foot as it was
exactly. So at one point, it looked like I was one of those guys on a lake standing on a...
running on a log.
I took a good 6 seconds to fall. Finally, I went face down in the front.
Oh, man. Well, your face looks all right. I don't see any visible damage.
I landed right on the tip of my middle finger of my left hand, and I've hurt that, but otherwise I was fine. But Carson, who laughs at any physical misfortune, didn't laugh, to her credit.
Oh,
she
wow.
witnessed it completely.
Yeah.
but she didn't laugh. I think I looked so old and pathetic
That's
falling.
what I was going to say. That might not be a good thing. If
No,
she
exactly.
might have thought, oh no, he's going to have broken a hip or something.
And that wasn't my only scare of the week. So Carsten and I went on a bird watching tour on Saturday. Because, we do this kind of thing now. And it was very nice. We saw 30 different types of birds. They sent us the list of all the birds we'd seen. It was excellent.
Yeah. Did you see an ivory-billed, what is it? A bird that's thought to be extinct. I thought I knew what it was. It's an ivory-billed something. Woodpecker, maybe? Ivory-billed woodpecker?
I don't think we saw that. I think it would have been bigger news.
Probably.
That would have made it to the back of the line. Extinct bird over there.
Yeah, right. But
we were walking along, and the guy who had the biggest camera, he said, "Oh, look, snakes." And you know how I feel about snakes, right?
Yes.
Not a big fan, but pretty much in denial that they even exist.
Right.
I intentionally don't go looking for them. I don't seek them out. I just assume that they don't exist. So we dawdled for these snakes, and he took some photos. But to me, it just looked like a pile of leaves. I was like, it's just a pile of leaves. Nothing to worry about. It's just a pile of leaves. But I was like, I had my camera, and there's a snake there, apparently. I'm like, look, I'm going to gird my loins here and lean over and take a photo of that snake, because it's a snake. It's an exciting moment in my life. I've got to face my fear and take a photo of that snake. So I did. I leaned over, and I saw the snake. Finally saw that there really was a snake in amongst that pile of leaves. It wasn't just a pile of leaves. And I was like, oh, that's kind of exciting. And as I took the photo, a guy, just a random guy, not a part of the birdwatching tour, walking past with his dog, let his dog nuzzle the back of my leg when I was wearing shorts.
I had a feeling something like this was coming.
I know. I've told an almost identical story about my boss. My boss has had that, where his dog, when he was looking at a snake and his dog nuzzled the back of his leg. Oh, but he owned that dog and he was in his yard. He kind of expected that. This dog came out of nowhere for me.
Right.
I kept it together, but my God, my heart was in my mouth. I was like,
did you end up halfway up a tree, sitting in the branches?
So yeah.
Well, that'll teach you to go out in nature and take pictures of things.
Right.
It's more dangerous than you might think.
Shall not make that mistake again.
Yeah.
I'd seen the dog before, because he'd walked past this down the trail the other way, and he was coming back. But I was just, I've told you the story about seeing the sharks, yeah?
I don't recall this story.
When we were in Thailand, I saw sharks. I saw like a 4-foot reef shark swimming underneath us. We were swimming in the water, and the shark was in the water with us.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I had like an out-of-body experience, because I had a snorkel mask on and I was looking down, and it felt like I was just watching TV. I was like, there's no way that this is me in this water. Yeah. This is a screen that's on the TV. Can't possibly be true. I did not blink until I got back in that boat. I did not take my eyes off that thing. I was like, just like lasers at it. And when I got back in the boat, Carson said, because you kept looking at the one shark, you didn't see the other two that were swimming behind you.
I think you have told me this story. Yeah. Yeah, you gotta be...
That's how I was with the snake. No peripheral vision, just the snake. Yeah. That's all I'm looking at here.
Laser focused on the snake.
All right, well, let's get down to business. How do we leave Daenerys Targaryen? Last we saw of Dany, she was trying to cement her position in Meereen. Her rule has been threatened by the Sons of the Harpy, who have murdered several, including members of her Unsullied. Resnak Moresnak is convinced that the Sons of the Harpy are baseborn. Skahazmo Kandak, a.k.a. Shavepate, is a local nobleman who wants bloody vengeance for the Sons of the Harpy murders against the former masters. And Hizdar Zolorak thinks that reopening the fighting pits would solve all their problems. But it will not bring the farmers' daughters back to life. Even the White Walkers might struggle with that pile of charred bones.
Yes, that's true.
Mackelly, why don't we give a summary of this one?
Okay. Well, Irri wakes Dany, who'd been dreaming of Daario, so assumes the news must be of him. However, the news is not of her sellsword crush. Dany notices Missandei crying, and Irri tells her she cries for Missandei's brother. Dany makes haste to meet her counselors.
9, they tell her. 9 of her people have been killed tonight by the sons of the Harpy. 6 unsullied, including Missandei's older brother, and 3 freedmen. Of the unsullied, the men were killed in pairs, and each pair in a different manner. 2 were poisoned at a wine shop they frequented. The shop owner and his daughter have been arrested, though they plead ignorance.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. Dany wants the merchant and his family questioned sweetly at first. They could very well be innocent. Of the murdered freemen, one was a famous harpist, Rylona Rhee, who had become a leader amongst the Yunkish freedmen. Dany changes her mind. Question the wine shop owner harshly. He will have the dragon's mercy. Skahaz suggests questioning the daughters sharply while the father looks on. That should prove more effective. Dany leaves it to his discretion.
Dany institutes a new policy. The Unsullied will be pulled back to guarding only Dany and the pyramid. The Meereenese will police their own streets henceforth. To pay for this new peacekeeping force, there will be a tax on every great house, 100 gold pieces for each freedman the sons of the Harpy have killed. Furthermore, Dany will have a boy and girl child from each house to act as cupbearer and pages, or read hostages.
Right. Dany dismisses the men and returns to her sleeping chamber. She beckons her little scribe to sleep with her. Dany asks to hear of Missandei's brother and offers to send her home to Noth. Missandei speaks highly of him and declines the offer to go home. She feels safer with Dany. At that, tears fill Dany's eyes. She wants to keep her safe, but she doesn't always know the right thing to do. But she has to know. She's all these people have. Mother to us all, Missandei calls her.
When Missandei falls asleep, Dany goes out onto the veranda and bathes in the pool. She fantasizes about Dario. Despite her desires of the flesh, she knows sending him away was the right move. She is a queen, and he is not king material. Dany hears a rustling and turns to see a woman in a hooded robe and mask. She recognizes the woman, well, the mask, as Quaithe. Dany asks if she's really here, and the woman answers no.
Quaithe tells Dany the glass candles are burning. The pale mare will come soon, followed by the rest. Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mummer's Dragon. Dany should trust none of them. She should remember the Undying and beware of the perfumed seneschal.
Dany asks why she should fear Reznak. She is tired of riddles. She wants to know what Quaithe wants from Dany. To show you the way, Quaithe responds. Dany knows the way. Go north to go south, east to go west, back to go forward. To touch the light, she must pass beneath the shadow.
Quaithe yada yada.
Yes, that's what I meant. Quaithe adds that she should remember the Undying, remember who Dany is.
Dany hears a voice calling her from the door. It's Missandei. When she looks back, Quaithe is gone. Later in the morning, when her counselors arrive, she looks hard at Reznak and Skahaz. Could they be part of the treasons the Undying spoke of? In her hall, she notices pillows stacked high on her bench and knows it was Barristan's work, and she does appreciate the more comfortable seating.
Dany hears from tradesmen who complain the freedmen are undercutting their prices and using their titles of master craftsmen. After she levies a verdict, Reznak calls up Hizdar Zolorak again. The man looks different than the previous 6 times he's appeared to her in court. He's cut his hair short and ditched the tokar. Let's see if this works its magic. This time, he's brought friends. They are freed slave fighters, and each argues for the reinstatement of the fighting pits.
When they were slaves, they had glory, comfy confines, and fine foods. Now they have none of the above. They want to fight for themselves. Even Dany's counselors have made pitches for reopening the fighting pits. Dany agrees to consider their arguments. And with that, she ends the day in court. On her walk to her chambers, she asks Barristan to tell her of how he escaped King's Landing. She needs a story with a happy ending.
Barristan tells her that when Joffrey removed him from the Kingsguard, he threw his cloak and sword at Joffrey's feet and stormed out. This much we knew.
Right.
Joffrey sent men to arrest him, and Barristan made quick work of them. He then rode down the gold cloaks at the gate to escape the city. Only briefly, though. The next day he went back in, disguised as an old man escaping the war in the Riverlands. He was there when Ned Stark lost his head. Dany said it was a traitor meeting a traitor's end. Barristan says that Ned did fight against her father, but that he also defended her, resigning as Hand of the King when Robert insisted that she be killed.
Dany speaks of guilt by association, and the idea sparks a thought of the little girl Drogon killed. She must see her other 2 dragons. Barristan takes her to the base of the pyramid where Rhaegal and Viserion are chained up. It wasn't easy getting them down there, and her men had no success at taking Drogon captive. The 2 look miserable, and Dany wonders what happens when they're too big for this chamber.
Dany questions how she did not see it coming, the death of the girl Hezea. What did she think would happen as her dragons grew? They do not fear man. The girl's father could have been lying, but Dany doubts it. She offered him 100 times the cost of a lamb and her deepest apologies. However, he could never speak of this again. The girl died of anything but a dragon attack. With Drogon still at large, Dany wonders what she has unleashed on the world.
Yeah, well, if she's paying out 100 times whatever the cost of a lamb is, she better swear each of them to secrecy, or there is going to be a rash of family members killing other family members.
That's very true. In fact, that's the real reason for doing that, I think, rather than her being embarrassed about what her dragons have done.
Yeah, could be.
Why be that embarrassed? I mean, they're dragons. They're going to kill people. You know, is it? If you were a local farmer, would your opinion of the dragons change dramatically if you hear it had killed one of your neighbor's daughters? Not a lot. You'd be still terrified of them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's true.
I will say, I feel like this chapter doesn't have much momentum to it, you know?
Right.
And I felt it when I was trying to do the comparison with the television show, because so much of this is just more of the same, you know? Again, she's woken in the night to learn that Unsullied are being murdered by the Sons of the Harpy. Again, she's hosting, you know, people complaining about her rule and arguing for the fighting pits being opened and worrying about the prophecies and worrying about her dragons. All of this is kind of like, just we're treading water a little bit here.
Right. That's very true. It does feel like we just you could have taken chapter 1, moved it to this, or Dany 1, moved it to this chapter, and we might not have noticed that it.
Right.
You know,
right.
It
was, which is why my comparison with the television show is just basically see last time, because you know they didn't feel the need to say all this twice. It was pretty self-evident.
Right. Although this is a chapter Missandei probably hopes to never have
That's
repeat.
True.
She does have another brother, so.
Yeah. And he's also in the Unsullied?
Yes. Yeah.
So she probably won't be an auntie ever anytime soon then.
Yeah, and that's true. That seems very unlikely.
Yeah.
But the Sons of the Harpy hit home in a pretty big way here, speaking of Missandei and the death of her older brother. His name was Mosador. I can't remember what the living brother's name is. But
let's kind of hope we never find out.
Well, true, yes. That might not bode well. Speaking of that, I wondered if the Sons of the Harpy intentionally targeted Mosador, knowing that, if they knew that his sister was someone so close and important to Daenerys.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
I think you're giving them too much smarts.
Possibly.
There.
Yeah, could be.
To me, it feels like they're just killing the Unsullied. They happen to catch one that would be particularly hurtful to Dany. But it's so difficult for her because, you know, I do feel for Dany here because she is really between a rock and a hard place. She has to hold still to prevent backsliding into slavery, which she abhors.
Yes.
She needs a place to let her dragons grow, but now she feels she can't let the dragons out.
Right, which is kind of defeating the purpose of finding a place for them
They
to grow.
may grow, but they're going to be kind of stunted and, unhappy in the meantime.
Yes, and who knows what... I guess we'll get to this when we get to it. When we get to that part of the chapter, but who knows what that type of captivity will do to, an animal.
I will say, though, she was at her best with Missandei. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Missandei is, she's a child who's lost her brother. She's distraught. She's had a terrible life, and gives her the opportunity to leave, to go back to Narth, which, I mean, I don't think Dany was calculating. She was offering for genuine, but...
Oh, yeah, right.
Missandei has nothing there, and like she says, chances are I'll get recaptured into slavery again if I go home.
Right.
I'm safe with you, which is...
And Noth is... Being a Nothi is a dangerous... That is a real possibility because Nothi are considered the best slaves because they're passive, peaceful, peace-loving, kind people, which it also makes them really ideal slaves according to these slavers, but it also makes them out of character to become warriors like Unsullied,
Yeah,
so
that's true. That's true.
So,
but I guess the Unsullied are so imprinted in what they're doing from such a young age that it doesn't matter what they are instinctively. They're going to be what they turn into.
That's true.
But Dany manages not only to make the kind offer of release back to home, but also she manages to take her mind off it, by letting her talk about her brother. Missandei gets to sleep and sort of even giggles before she goes to sleep at one point.
Yeah.
Dany can't sleep because of it, but it's one of Dany's better moments as a human being.
Yes, definitely. Book. Yeah. Do you think so? Missandei says, "I feel safer with you," and we were just discussing that. Noth is a dangerous place in the fact that slavers can target that area, even though there is that sickness that does kind of keep the slavers at bay a bit. But anyway, do you think that maybe she feels that way because she's with Dany? She at the confined to the top of the Great Pyramid, and therefore maybe she's safer than a lot of the rest of the people in Meereen.
Oh, you mean if she was a regular Meereenese freed slave, she might be like, really? You'll give me passage home? I'm going, because this place is no place.
A bit, yeah. She's kind of cocooned up there, right next to the queen and in the safety of the top of the Great Pyramid and all that.
Yes, I think it's a safe assumption to say, yes, Missandei is answering not for the general populace, but for herself.
Right, yeah.
and Dany would be foolish to hear Missandei's answer as well. All the slaves are delighted with the way things are going.
Right. I won't offer that to any of them ever again. Why would they want that? But I love the vulnerability she shows, like you were saying, here alone with Missandei. And it just reminds you that she's still half a child herself. Well,
right.
As long as she wasn't born in the north of Westeros.
Well,
because, I mean, come on.
She'd have that grandmotherly teenager thing going.
Right. And she confesses too. She thinks to herself, Missandei is still a child, and I feel like I can be a child around her at times. And she confesses she doesn't know what she's doing. She's just kind of trying to figure it out. And, Missandei calls her everyone's mother, like, no added pressure there. Like, well, you are responsible for all of us, so I guess you better figure it out.
It is a moment sort of like, I'm not really a leader, but I do manage some people. And occasionally they'll ask me to tell them what to do. And I'm, 50% of the time, I'm quite clueless,
Right.
But they're looking to me for an answer, and I've got to come up with one,
Yeah,
And it's in my 50s. It's not trivial to do that,
Oh yeah, yeah.
And in my 50s, I've learned to say, hey, I'm not sure, but this is what I think we should do, you know.
Right.
But to do it as a 15-year-old, I would not have a clue. You know, it would be so hard not to be a lapdog to an advisor who had an air of authority about them. It would be so difficult to resist that person.
Yes.
You would just want to be under that person's wing all the time.
Yeah.
But she isn't being like that. She is expressing her own desires. She's standing up to them over the fighting bits. Right. I think she's probably wrong, and I think it's dawning on her that she's probably wrong about it. But she is sticking to her guns for now.
Yeah. Excellent points. Yeah. I absolutely see all that, except for you saying you're not much of a leader. I think you are a very capable leader. So,
well, that's very kind. I was fishing for that, really. But what I'm saying is true. I mean, like, I really am, you know, on uncertain ground quite often, and I don't have a perfume seneschal whispering in my ear when I'm, you know, looking for help.
Right.
The book is basically stopping with me, and I'm like, okay, let's try this.
Well, you know, we're rewatching right now season 1 of The Last of Us in preparation to start watching season 2 because it's been so long we can't really remember. Yeah. And, you know, when the world's falling apart and Joel and his brother have Joel's daughter in the back of the truck and they're trying to figure out what to do, what a terrifying position to be as a parent. I was thinking about, you know, if this kind of thing was happening, right, you know, with my family, I would probably be one of the mass casualty because I wouldn't know what to do and I would just end up getting us into some situation.
Yeah, statistically, we all will be one of the mass casualties, just to be clear.
Well, true. Yes.
You know, Don't feel too bad. Don't be like, I'm no Joel. Here I am, dying on day one.
Only one that failed day one.
Right. Yeah. No, that's not how it will go. But you're going to think that anything like that is... It's just a look of the draw, you know. It's just the absolute look of the draw, you know. I've several times I've been to the American cemetery in Normandy for Normandy landings, and you read some of the stories of those people, and it's just like so many were killed and so many weren't killed, and almost all of it is just absolute random chance why you survived and why you didn't. It was just
very true.
What the one that I've been to see several times shares a last name with Carson. Not necessarily a relative, but he won the Congressional Medal of Honor, and he kept going back and forth to the boats to help people like through a minefield.
Wow!
Can you imagine? So he'd come in and manage to survive and get to the top of the beach where he could no longer be hit by the machine gun fire, and he went back to help people. Yeah,
that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. But he did it like 3 times and then he was killed the 4th time, you know. So it's just
what a loss of someone with so much bravery and valor, you know.
Right. But that's the thing, you see. Joel is probably just the most that's Joel's retelling of what happened. He was probably hiding and pushing his daughter out, and, you know.
Maybe, yeah.
It's the craven hiders who survived the first day. It's not the brave and the heroic.
Exactly. Oh, we've gotten off track. What were we talking about?
I don't remember. We were reading a book, if I remember right.
That's right. Something like that.
But I do think Dany's making the right decision with drawing the Unsullied back to just be her personal guard again. Because a Meereenese force would be less of a target for the Sons of the Harpy. I mean, presumably it would be majority freed slaves, pretty much all freed slaves. So they wouldn't care about killing them, but they would also know that killing them is not going to hurt Dany as much.
True. I was kind of struggling with what the force would be made up of. If it's made up of freedmen, the Sons of the Harpy still might be as violent toward them because they're angry that these slaves have now become freedmen and are taking their jobs and are undercutting them and all that. But if they're made up of former non-slaves, then can you trust that they will be, you know, working in the best interest of Dany and the cause?
Yeah, I think the first of those, because I do think it'll be almost all freed slaves, the calculation is, am I getting closer to dislodging Dany as ruler of Meereen by killing these guys? Because if the answer to that is yes, then the Sons of the Harpy will keep doing it.
Right.
But if it's just wetting my sword, I mean, what's the point? If she'll just throw more slaves after the last ones, that they're just patrolling the streets. That's all they're doing. They're not actually oppressing you. They're not. But I suppose, I mean, that's the question, though, to a certain extent, is what is she going to ask them to do? Like, for instance, if they see someone treating someone like a slave, will they intervene and say, hey, you can't treat those people like that anymore? On the word of Daenerys Targaryen.
Yeah. Right.
They might get themselves killed by the Sons of the Harpy for saying that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's part of it, right? I mean, they're supposed to keep the law and the peace.
Right.
And if they're enforcing that in a way that the Sons of the Harpy don't like, then they are as much targets as the Unsullied. Yeah. They just don't mean as much to Dany. That's terrible for me to say, but
no, but it's
the Unsullied are her personal force.
Right.
Right. So,
but of course, the other side of that coin is the hostages she's planning to take, and that might be a bigger deal.
Yes, that's true.
But I don't. The Sons of the Harpy would test her on that. If she takes 100 boys and 100 girls from the big families, and the killings continue, what does she do? She murders them. She murders a child.
That's true.
They might test her mettle to find out if she would do that, and if she does do it, well, then they might fall into line out of sheer terror from that point onwards.
Yes, that's right. Especially if it was from House Zach or Merrick, those two houses that she is tired unto death of.
Right. Yeah, believe me, these will be the first.
Right. Yeah. Those two families are thinking of leaving Meereen, and Dany says, awesome, fine, they can leave, but their gold's staying here with me.
Right.
And and I was thinking it's not a bad call to make them leave their wealth in Meereen, because I would very much imagine that they would go straight to Yunkai and help Yunkai in their war effort against Dany and Astapor.
Indeed, yeah. So Dany seems, we know this, but Dany seems kind of obsessed still by Daario Naharis. I mean, she's thinking he's not king material, but it doesn't stop her dreams.
Right. Yes, and yeah, like you said, she thought about him in Dany 1. But now it seems to be full-blown smittenness. She thinks about him. She thinks enough about him to have jealous thoughts about him being with other women.
Right. Right.
But like you said, not smitten enough to overlook that he's not marrying material.
No. Right.
Yeah. But she does fear that he could be one of the traitors. That it's been a while. He's been gone a while, and she fears that she remembers the 3 betrayals from the Undying: once for blood, once for gold, once for love, and fears that maybe Daario is going to fall into one of these categories.
But that her betrayal detector just goes off at anyone's name, basically.
Yeah, right.
Reznax, Gahaz, Daario. It could be any of Barristan. She has no confidence in any of her friends now.
No, and especially since Jorah did actually, her closest confidant did actually betray her.
I was gonna say the same thing. The table was set by Jorah because she feels he betrayed her, which is true to an extent, but not as true as she thinks it is.
Right, and Mirri Mazdor before him, because she trusted Mirri Mazdor to take care of Khal Drogo, and she thought she had saved Mirri Mazdor from rape and murder, and turned out that Mirri Mazdor only wanted to get retribution for what the Khalasar had done. So you could see there's a history there.
Yeah. So Quaithe's visit is the most discussion-worthy part of the chapter, I think. Although actually, for once, the prophecy is way more clear-cut than usual, I think. I understood almost all of the prophecy straight off the bat. I understood. So to take you through it, sort of like in sequence, just remind me who Quaithe is, because
okay, sure. So Quaithe was originally, the first time we were introduced to her, she was part of the group that rode out from Qarth to Vase Teloro, that abandoned city in the Red Waste. Then she first appeared to Dany when the fire mage was climbing that ladder in Karth, and she said, hey, that guy wasn't able to do that previously. Right. Magic is increasing since your dragon's hatched.
Mackelly is paraphrasing.
Yes, that wasn't word for word. She also said, leave the city ASAP before you're never allowed to leave. Again, paraphrasing her words. And that is when she gave Dany the riddle, go north, to go south, to reach west, go east, you go forward. To go forward, you must go back. To touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow.
Yeah.
And Dany at that point realized, hey, I think Quaithe wants me to go to Shai. And Quaithe said, I want you to go to Shai to find the truth. So that was the first time that they had a real conversation. The time that Dany references in this chapter, she said, I saw you on Balerion. I dreamt of you. That's what it was. I dreamt of you when I was on Balerion. Remember, that was one of the ship names.
Right.
She had woken in the night to a faint shadow of Quaithe. This was the night before she tricked the good masters of Astapor and ended up,
right,
flipping the city. And again, she repeated the go south, to go north, go west, to go east. To go west, you got to go east. All that. And that was the last time that we had seen Quaithe. So this time, she gives her. In the summary, did we mention the? Or
we didn't.
Go through
we did. No, you said it all, but
okay.
I thought we go through it. So she said, well, sort of before the prophetic sounding part, she tells her that the glass candles are burning again, and we knew that one because we actually saw one when Sam went to the Citadel.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a Euron connection there as well, no, it's not a Euron connection. It's somebody with a name a little bit like Euron supposedly lit a candle, a glass candle in Essos.
Euron Goodbrother in Karth, I think it was.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And there's a lot of rumors about what this means and what the capabilities of these candles are. Some, say that you can see and communicate across distances, and it can give you visions and dreams. And
some say they are a harbinger of dragons as well, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. And all that, the fact that they're burning again goes along with the fact that there's dragons in the world again, and that magic is increasing since the dragons hatched. And we've heard that the pyromancer's abilities, they have claimed, Helene has claimed,
as
gotten stronger.
As Quaithe said, hey, he didn't used to be able to do that.
Right. Direct quote right out of Quaithe's mouth.
And then she tells her who's coming, right? She says,
yes.
These people are coming to you. And the first one is the Pale Mare. And that's the only one that I find very confusing. I've looked it up and I know what it is, but I don't think there's any sort of indication of what it really is. I thought it might be her, Dany's silver, but it isn't. It's something else. That it's an event. It is actually a white horse, but it's coming in the near future, and it's a harbinger of something else. But there's no clues to it, so it's just
exactly.
It's actually basically Quaithe going, I am actually going to give you a little prophecy here, and then just tell you some stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. Some of her things are, like you said, they're more. She's better at this than, say, John Aaron, with the seed is strong. Some of hers are a little more direct.
Right.
Like the next one, the Kraken. The next one is the Kraken and Dark Flame. The Kraken, we know that Euron has sent his brother Victarion to find Dany and to bring her back to be Euron's wife. And we know the Victarion has thought to himself, oh, I'll go find Dany, but I'm going to make her my wife, not your wife. So it seems pretty obvious that's the Kraken she's speaking of.
Right. Dark Flame?
Yeah, so Dark Flame is not, at least the information we have right now, is not as obvious. Could it possibly be the Blackfires? Meaning the Golden Company expecting to meet her in Volantis? Possibly?
Yes, I like Blackfire because Dark Flame, Blackfire has
right.
There's
literally the sword that Aegon the Conqueror wielded was called Blackfire. So maybe the sword has been lost, and maybe we'll have a reemergence. But she's saying this as these things seem like she's speaking of people, not of objects.
Yeah.
Except for the glass candle.
Right. And actually, I did think about the glass candle there as well, because I was thinking about Euron, and if Euron is tied to the burning glass candle, that could be considered a dark flame as well, although I'm not sure that's quite right.
Yeah.
The next one is the lion and the griffin, and this one is quite easy even for me, because there's one lion in all of Essos, and that is Tyrion Lannister, and he happens to be traveling with a person called Griff.
Right. Yeah. Who also happens to have a son named Young Griff. So,
right.
So, yeah. Now, of course, Dany has no idea who we're talking about, but she doesn't know who the Kraken is either at this point.
That's a good point. That's reasonable. Mm-hmm.
But and another one that seems pretty easy to parse out is the sun, S-U-N's, sun, S-O-N, and sun being
the male child of the big hot ball at the center of the solar system.
Right. And we know that the son of Doran Martell is Quentyn Martell, who is making his way. He's stuck in Volantis right now, trying to get to Slaver's Bay.
And the sigil of House Martell is the sun with a spear through it. Yeah,
right.
It feels like that is definitely who we're talking about here. And then the Mummer's Dragon gets a mention. The Mummer's Dragon. So that sounds like someone pretending to be a Targaryen.
Right, it does. We don't have any obvious context at the moment.
Or that farmer pretending that those bones were his daughters.
Oh, yes. The fake dragon attack. Could be.
Yeah.
Again, I was thinking...
I think it's a Targaryen faker. Yeah.
And who do we know that were pretenders to the crown? But again, the Blackfires. The legitimized Targaryen bastard line.
Mm-hmm.
But there is someone else who's close to Dany, who claims to have Targaryen blood, a drop, by his own admission. You're pointing?
Big fella? Used to fight in the fighting pits? Brown Ben Plum, the very fella.
Brown Ben Plum claims to have Targaryen blood in him. I mean, he's a sellsword, so by his very nature, you probably don't want to trust him too much.
Good point.
I'm not sure that one would be worth mentioning.
But did Quaithe say not to trust any of these people?
Yes, she said.
She did?
Oh, yes, she said don't trust any of them. And the one that we've left out to this point is the perfumed seneschal. And we know, specifically Dany has told us, that Mo Resnack, is a seneschal, and he does douse himself with perfume.
Yeah, so, it's hard to see past Resnack for that one. And she is specifically saying don't trust this one.
And the only thing is that is so on the nose that it feels like, really? Is that obvious that you're talking about Resnack? So there are a couple other options that people have discussed as possibilities. Varys, he is perfumed and he is a seneschal of sorts.
Yeah,
and
not a self-titled one like Resnack is, but he fulfills the same role to a certain extent.
Right, and his tag team partner Illyrio is also a perfumed seneschal of sorts as a magister.
Yeah.
So, there's talk of could it be too obvious that it's Resnack? Could it possibly be one of the other two, Varys or Illyrio?
That's the only thing going against Resnack is how clear it is that it is him. Makes you feel like some subterfuge is happening here.
Yes,
and then she's told to remember the Undying, which presumably refers to the prophecies that she heard in the House of the Undying.
Yes, and remember, Dany's response is, yes, I remember the prophecies. They called me Child of Three, and I thought this is a good opportunity to just look back at the prophecies. There were the 3 fires you must light, one for life, one for death, one to love. 3 mounts you must ride, 1 to bed, 1 to dread, 1 to love, and the 3 treasons, which we already mentioned a little bit ago, one for blood, once for gold, and once for love. And I don't think we've had any major updates to any of those since we last checked in on them.
No.
I mean, I think the last time we checked in on them was probably when Jorah.
Which, yeah. And we attributed that one to gold because he was doing it to get back in favor with the Westerosi crown, at least in her view, and that's financial more than anything else.
Right. He could go back and be Lord of Bear Island again, I guess, theoretically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one for blood, the treason for blood, seems like Mirri Maz Duur. We've discussed that as well. And, the three fires, one for life, one for death, one to love. I think we've come to the conclusion that the one for life was Drogo's pyre because it hatched the dragons.
Right.
One for death could also be the same fire because it ended Drogo's life.
Yeah.
Yes, although he was already dead beforehand. So,
yeah.
But it killed Mirri Maz Duur. She was alive.
Certainly did. Yes.
And the one fire to light for love, I don't know off the top of my head. I can't remember what we threw out last time. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's dragon fire. You love love your dragons.
Yeah. So, so that was Quaithe. Thanks, Quaithe. Thanks for disappearing when people come in the room. Make me look like an idiot for talking to myself. Appreciate it. So Hizdar Molarak is back for the 7th time, but this time with friends and with a new haircut, which is a good idea because I think she found him a bit ridiculous with his hair.
And he dropped the Tokar, which she hated the Tokar. She thought it was a sign of elitism. So
and the case is getting stronger. I mean, it would help her financially because there's money to be made from this, and it would give some of the more stronger, more violent people an opportunity to sort of like quench their bloodlust. And these freed slaves really are want this for themselves. They were forced to do it, but now they're willing to do it as a choice.
And since they've been freed, they've mentioned that they've had a major step down in lifestyle.
Right.
And that Hizdar is offering 50% of the gate to the winners, which makes sense because right now he's getting 100% of nothing. So, if you could at least get 50%, and remember when all of them were shut down, Hizdar went and bought up all the fighting pits.
Right, so he's got a huge financial reason for wanting this to happen.
Yes, he was buying low in hopes to reap the rewards.
Yeah.
And she thinks to herself she owes these slaves a blood debt. And she's referring to when she was punishing Jorah and Barristan for deceiving her, she sent them into the sewers of Meereen to open the gates and let her force in. And so they went in, they freed the slaves, and the slaves helped overthrow the guards. And so she feels like she owes them for helping her take the city.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now,
so I'm beginning to come around to this. I think the case for opening the pits is becoming more and more compelling and necessary. You do hate to give the masters anything that they want.
Yeah.
But the situation in the city is becoming unsustainable. She can't afford to lose any men. Remember, she's trying to build an army to take back Westeros. She certainly can't afford to lose 9 men in one night.
Right.
If that's the kind of rate she's losing them, she won't be queen here in about 3 weeks.
That's getting really, really dangerous.
Yeah.
And even her own people are arguing, her own counselors are arguing for the reopening of the pits.
Yeah.
And of course, Barristan threw out the same suggestion that I threw out, which is, why don't we just hold a tourney? And we could just use blunted instruments and not enough bloodshed.
You know what? Maybe not. But I tell you what, you could have like downbill events that aren't deadly.
Sure. Yeah.
Have some downbill events that are not deadly, and then maybe each night there's one deadly fight between.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. That makes some sense. I can see that. To
the pain.
Right. It's better than nothing, people. Come on now.
Exactly.
But like we mentioned in earlier, we get the details of Barristan's escape from King's Landing. And we knew the general result, obviously. He's
Right.
here, so we knew he survived.
He was there, now he's here.
Right. And now we get the how of it. We had heard that he had slain 3 gold cloaks when they attempted to arrest him. Now we get the details of that, and he might have saved Jon some trouble if he had killed Slynt, because Slynt challenged him because Barristan didn't have a sword, but Barristan did have his knife and managed to kill one of Slynt's guards and then ride down the rest and, then rode to the gate where he killed 2 more men and rode, out of the city. So he might have saved Jon a lot of headache had he killed Slynt there and then.
That's true. True. Also, if Barristan had just stuck around King's Landing, at the rate he was killing them, she could have walked in.
It's true. He might have been more useful to Dany if he'd stayed in the city. But he tells her that, he decided he was going to try and find the true king to serve. And we knew this because the rumor must have gotten out that he made this claim, this exclamation, I should say, because Renly asked Cat when they were talking at the top of, I think it was the castle of Bitterbridge, if Barristan was with Robb. And Cat was like, no, why? And he said that he had heard that Barristan had said he was going to go serve the true king. So,
right, yeah.
He was, Renly was hoping he had saved a spot, that the one he gave to Brienne, he had saved in his Rainbow Guard for Barristan to show up.
If you didn't have such a good memory for this, would you have thought that Barristan being stripped of the Kingsguardness came before or after Cat meeting Renly at Bitterbridge? I would have had that like ages after, but obviously not. Obviously, it was the other way around.
Yeah. It's been a lot of details. We've gone through
a lot of water has passed under that bridge. Yeah, that's for sure.
The bitter bridge, as it were.
Yeah, indeed.
But he also he was there for Ned's execution, and
right. That was
I
news.
thought that was that was an interesting revelation.
Yeah, and, actually, come to think of it, that he was already off the Kingsguard when that happened. But that does make sense, actually, because he may have stopped it. He may have said, this is not happening.
Right. Like he said, he went, after that, he went to the Great Sept of Baelor, or some sept, and thanked the 7 that Joffrey did remove him, so he didn't have to be complicit to all this terribleness. But Dany says, well, good riddance to Ned Stark, and Barristan defends Ned and says he tried to spare you. And, I wonder if this is to show Dany that not all the usurper's dogs are indistinguishable. So if and when she ever does make it back to Westeros, maybe she will use a more nuanced approach.
Right, yeah. And of course, a lot of her information will have come from Viserys. There's not going to be an awful lot of shades of grey to Viserys' view of the world.
There's not. Barristan didn't go as far as to explain the valid grievances that the Starks had with the Mad King. He didn't say, oh, and by the way, your father also boiled his father and strangled his brother, for sport, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But he did tell her that it was Varys who told the small council that she was with child, and that's when Robert wanted her dead. And I was thinking, if Dany discovers that Illyrio is working with Varys, might that little nugget of information cause distrust between the, from her toward them?
He was the spy master. He was supposed to be gaining information. What Robert does with that information is not in Varys' control. Varys didn't want her murdered.
Yeah, that's true. I guess theoretically he could have not said anything.
I suppose so.
Wouldn't have known, but
yeah. But you're right. That's potentially a stumbling block for the relationship between Dany and Varys, but by association, Illyrio Mopatis as well.
Right. That and the destroying of his 3 ships.
Yeah, I mean, all right. I've got a buddy who maybe almost got you murdered, but you stole my ships.
Right. Destroyed them nonetheless.
So this whole chapter is another character doing some soul searching. And I get that she's not prepared for the crimes that the dragons are committing, but she could have seen it coming. You know, she wanted these dragons to grow into fearsome beasts that could be ridden in battle and kill people. Well, they're going to kill people, you know, and they're going to kill people, especially when they're young and stupid, you know, because maybe as they grow older, they could be more tame, more, you know. But there are things she could do. There's a middle ground, I think, between what she's done with Rhaegal and Viserion, chaining them up in the dark, which is, it's awful for me as a dog owner to think of that. But
I know. Yeah, it bothered me too.
Yeah.
And how long can she keep them down there? You know, At some point, they're going to get big enough they're either going to get big enough to break free, or they're going to get sick and weak from being confined in the darkness like this, you know?
Or the other end of the extreme, because she's actually doing both extremes. She's got those two in the dark, and she's got Drogon off the leash and doing whatever he wants, you know? So she hasn't stopped the problem, because everyone's pretty sure it was Drogon that killed the child in the first place.
Right.
So he's still out there. Meanwhile, the innocent are being punished. So I don't know. I just think the middle ground is you feed them very well and very carefully and give them a free rein, but you keep feeding them so they don't feel the need to hunt.
True. Yeah. You know, clearly the Targaryens of old had means of rearing and controlling dragons. She just doesn't know what that is.
But you know what happened? They weakened and eventually died out. So the control maybe is a problem. Maybe you have to let these be wild animals. But the thing is, I was thinking about it, is there are wild animals. There are lions and there are bears and things like that. Now, admittedly, you don't want the farmer to kill the dragons, which the farmer might try to do to the lion or the bear. But at the same time, you live in the world with scary animals. Be careful with your kid.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, they can drop out of the sky, you know, which is
they are the scariest of the bunch, I admit.
Right, yeah.
But you keep them well fed, and that should minimize things, I think. You know?
Yeah, and it seems like Drogon he might not be likely to return to Meereen very often if they keep trying to capture him every time he comes back. And he's going to continue to grow, which will make it less likely that they would be able to capture him. So they've got a real situation going on there. But the two that are confined, Rhaegal and Viserion, they made me think of, do you remember the movie from the 80s or 90s called Free Willy? It was about an orca,
I never
a little
saw
boy
it,
that
but I know
kind of befriended an orca. Well, in that movie, I remember a detail. Willie's dorsal fin was bent over. It kind of like flopped over. And I was thinking about that because the trainer at the facility said all captive orcas have that situation. And I looked it up. 80 to 90% do have that, you know, their
and almost none in the wild.
Yes, exactly. It's like less than 1% in the wild have that situation. And there are many theories exactly as to why. It could be, you know, water imbalance or dietary issues from confinement, the lower blood pressure due to decreased activity from confinement, collagen, which is what makes up the dorsal fin, could overheat due to too much time at the surface of the water due to confinement, and swimming in small circles because of lack of space.
Same direction. Yeah.
Yes, due to confinement. So, you know, all these stem from confinement, and I just wonder what kind of confinement issues we're going to find with dragons.
Did you ever see the movie Blackfish?
Did I? It sounds familiar.
It's a documentary about orcas and their captivity.
Okay, then I have not. Maybe I'm thinking of Big Fish.
It's a very Big Fish with Ewan McGregor, I think.
Yes.
No, it's a documentary about the confinement of orcas, and it's very interesting. It makes you feel bad about their confinement, but
Sure. Yeah.
also makes you realize how flipping terrifying those animals actually are.
I bet they're so huge. And
Yeah.
they're not called killer whales for nothing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Just once in a while, they're going to be themselves. They're going to let their natural instincts come out. There's a great line in that movie where one of the people who worked with them said, I know zero about orcas. I don't know anything about them at all, but I do know a lot about training an animal to do something.
Yeah.
That I know, but orcas, I don't understand them at all. But
wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and they used to swim with these things, but it's like I would really want to know about an orca before I got in there with them.
Yeah, right.
All right, it's time for spoilers. You know what? The spoilers, it's getting better. I don't know how he's doing it, but it's getting better. You should really join at the upper levels of the sustainer tier so you can get in on the spoilers. They're so much fun. Honestly, there's not that many people in those upper tiers. I mean, this is just basically me and Mackelly talking to a handful of people. You've really got to get in on this. That's the best part. Okay, thanks. Excellent spoilers as usual. Time for some background.
All right. Well, so Dany is lamenting her role in bringing dragons back into the world, especially with no clue how to properly train them or safeguard others from them as they grow. So let's look back at how it's believed that dragons emerged in the known world in the first place. Obviously, nobody knows the origins of dragons for sure. So in his book, Unnatural History by Septon Barth, he examines several origin story legends. So let's look at the legends that he examined. The Valyrians believe that the dragons emerged from the 14 Flames, the ring of volcanoes in the Valyrian Peninsula. Other cultures have even more fanciful ideas, such as in Qarth, there are stories of dragons coming from a second moon that exploded and millions of dragons spilled forth. While others believe that dragons came from the Shadowlands beyond Asshai. And in Asshai, tales are told of people who came from outside the known world who brought dragons to Valyria, taught the Valyrians the ways of dragon ownership, and then faded from the historic records. Septon Barth himself conjectured that dragons might have been created by blood mages in Valyria using wyverns as their kind of biological root. But regardless, the indications of dragons' presence has been found all over the known world, with bones having been found as far north as Ib, as far south as Sothorio. I really struggle over that word. Sothorios. Even as far east as Yeti, there are stories of dragons having lived there. So there you go.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's good stuff.
Probably none of them are true, but we just don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
I would go with the blood. I think Septon Barth's idea that blood mages created them in Valyria makes as much sense as anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go with sort of Darwinistic evolution.
Sure.
They just came to be.
Right.
To be fair to Septon Barth, he didn't know Darwin like I do, you know.
Well, that's true. Yes.
Right.
Not studied him nearly as closely.
Right. Comparison with the television show, since this, like we said, this chapter echoes the last chapter, they were basically merged into one scene in the show. The idea of Missandei having a brother was dropped. That only Viserion and Rhaegal are chained is kept. Drogon is off causing bother. And as I said, kind of harsh on the two of them because we all know it was Drogon who murdered the little girl. And in the show, Barristan absolutely tells Dany what her dad was like. And she kind of resists it. She kind of says, "No, you're just repeating the lies of the usurper spread." And Barristan says, "No, he set entire towns alight and castles ablaze, murdered sons in front of their fathers, burned men alive with wildfire, laughing as they screamed. All of that led to the rebellion that killed every Targaryen except for her and Viserys." So he gives it to her both barrels in the TV
bluntly,
show.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
haven't gotten that level. She mentions in this chapter that they did call her father mad, and that Barristan told her there is a madness trait in the Targaryen line. but I don't think we've heard him be that blunt about what her father was like, to my recollection anyway.
I think he's blunter in the TV show for sure. But again, it might come up, and in which case I will apologize for having spoiled, and then I will compare it to the television show and say, this is very much kept.
Right. And Missandei is like, 20 years probably? Maybe.
Yeah. Missandei's
15 years older
a
than...
grown-up, not a child.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's played by Natalie Emanuel, I think her name is.
Who's English, I think.
Yes.
They all are. Yeah.
She's very fetching.
She's very fetching. And I think she was on a really terrible soap opera called Hollyoaks in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah. Pedantry Corner, I didn't see anything this time. I'm missing out on pedantry. I want him to be a bit more loose and free with books. Right. You know what? If he took a little less time, he could have more mistakes for Pedantry Corner, you know.
Right.
It's a win-win. Come on, George. Right, yeah. Just publish.
Yeah. Just write. We'll point out all your flaws. No worries.
And honestly, they just add to the richness of it when you make mistakes, you know?
Exactly.
If the wall weeps north... Oh, actually, that was last week, wasn't it? The wall was weeping to the north. Okay. You're fine, George. Keep going. Same pace. News and notes.
So George Martin gave some updates on adaptations of his A Song of Ice and Fire related works. He's watched the 6 episodes of The Hedge Knight, and as he put it, he loves it lots. He also mentioned that Ira Parker and his team are working hard on season 2 of the show based on the novella The Sworn Sword, which is also book 2 of that series. And he's been so inspired by all the Dunk and Egg work that he wants to start working on the next novella today. But he won't. He says he won't, anyway. In other news, the play The Iron Throne has been coming along. He said he can't tell us much yet, except that they don't have a theater yet, they don't have a cast yet, and they don't have a date yet. But everyone involved is very excited. So,
you know what? I will say, if he's announcing that he isn't writing, that I believe.
Right.
Sometimes I think he's a little dishonest with his posts, but this one I believe. And in case you're living under a rock, and that's funny that you should put those words, because this is entirely news to me. So,
really?
Yeah.
So, in case you've been living under a rock with Simon.
Dire wolves are back after more than 12,500 years. George Martin mentioned on his blog that there are big news coming on April 8th that did not have anything to do with writing Winds of Winter. He shouldn't be allowed to do that. He shouldn't be allowed to say, I've got big news.
Well, he did say, and it doesn't have anything to do with...
Yeah, but he shouldn't even be allowed to say that. He should always say, I have some very minor and uninteresting news, you know.
Right.
So, but unfortunately for George, the news broke a day early. The news is nonetheless colossal. Scientists at Colossal Biosciences have performed the first de-extinction of an animal. Is this true that there's never been a de-extinction before?
I don't know. I'm just going off of what the article said.
Uh-huh. They have successfully birthed 3 direwolf pups. You know what's even more amazing about this story? What do you think I didn't know going into reading this story?
Any of this,
but in particular, that direwolves were ever real.
Oh,
I didn't even know that. I mean, I'm like
nearly 13,000 years, so I
haven't met one. Yeah. Right, but they got 3 direwolf pups, 2 boys, Remus and Romulus, and a girl called Khaleesi. That's very good. George Martin posted a picture of himself holding one of the boys on his blog. The direwolves were created by blending DNA from a grey wolf with that from ancient direwolf fossils. The company admits that the pups aren't 100% genetically identical to the direwolf. They're functional copies that look more like a direwolf than anything we've seen in the world in nearly 13,000 years. George Martin is going to get 5-6 of these as pets.
Right.
And we're going to get way more realistic direwolves in the next George Martin inspired TV show, I feel.
Yeah, maybe. They could be real. They don't even have to be CGI.
Exactly. Although I've got to say, I'm pretty terrified of wolves. All animals, let's be honest. I'd be quite scared of these things. I mean...
I bet. Yeah, I bet they're pretty big.
You know what I bet's going to happen? I bet Remus and Khaleesi are going to end up chained up in George's dungeon.
Right.
While Romulus just
runs free.
Kills sheep left and right.
I got to say, I feel like the people at Colossal Biosciences didn't really read A Song of Ice and Fire or watch A Game of Thrones because Khaleesi, did they not
It's
consider
okay. It could have been
Sansa
Sansa
or
might have been
Arya
nice. Yeah,
or
yeah.
Nymeria? You know, I mean, something direwolf related.
Yes, that's true. Nymeria would have been a fantastic name.
Yes, it would have. That's probably the spot on name was
Oh my
Nymeria.
goodness.
But Lady could have called her Lady. But
if they call her Lady, I think they should have put a bow in her hair. That would have been
right.
perfect. But Remus and Romulus, yeah, I mean, that's nice, but it's not anything to do with George with Game of Thrones, you know?
Could have been Eddard or Ned,
yeah.
you know, something like that.
That's very good.
Brandon.
All right, enough of this idle speculation, but one last piece of news. We're going to have a sustainer call on Tuesday, April 22nd, which I think you have a week to prepare yourselves.
That's right. Based on my calendar, that sounds about right. You have a week to prepare yourselves as long as I remember to send out the invite at least a week ahead of time.
Consider this the invite.
Right. And hey, here's a spot right here.
It actually says, in our notes, it says, your review goes here.
Yes. If you like what we're doing and you want to help us out, please go to Apple Podcasts or Podchaser or anywhere else that you can leave a 5-star rating and a nice review, and we will read your review right here, right now. So, yeah, we'd love it if you'd go out and do that for us.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right, let's conclude this one. The problems in Meereen continue for Dany. She's somewhat quagmired. Will reopening the fighting pits help resolve things? I think it might help in some ways. Gives boost to the economy a little bit, but it's hard to see it solving the problems with the Sons of the Harpy.
Yeah, and will switching out the Unsullied for the Meereenese police force help?
Well, it'll help protect the Unsullied.
It will, for sure, yes. Will it help stop or slow down what the Sons of the Harpy are doing? I think it depends on who's in the police force and how honest and loyal that force is to Dany. I feel like she is in the you broke it, you bought it territory in Slaver's Bay at this point, you know?
Yeah.
If she washes her hands and leaves, many freed slaves are likely going to suffer awful consequences for the actions
unless she
that have happened.
Takes them with her in her ragtag Khalasar.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Where next? I mean, there's a lot of this continent between where she is and where she needs to get to, and that's going to be a lot of hardship for these people.
Yeah. And as Illyrio put it, it's a hard road just to go from Slaver's Bay to Volantis, and a lot of them won't even survive that. Yeah.
Quaithe warns against trusting basically everybody, which is
right.
Which it could be Quaithe being honest, but Quaithe has got her own wishes here, you know. To go west, go east. That you mean come visit you to get back my throne? That's what you mean? Yeah, pretty much that.
Yeah, right. Like so, in some ways, the things that Quaithe has been saying reminds me a bit of what Jorah was doing.
Yeah,
kind of trying to push everyone else away. Don't trust anyone but me. I'm the only one you can trust, so I have the only influence over you.
Yeah,
and Dany has parsed out that Quaithe wants her in Asshai.
Yeah.
And we don't know why. She says to show you the path or whatever her wording is. These positive reasons, these nefarious reasons, we don't know any of that yet.
Yeah. So Quaithe's actual words on the first prophecy thing was to go north, go south, to go west, go east, to, what was the other one? To
go back, to go forward, you must
go forward, go back. To get to the light, go through the shadow. But most of all, to go west, go east. That's the key one.
Right. Keep going east till I tell you to stop.
Exactly. Literally tell you, because I'll be there waiting for you.
Right. But, we know the Martell plan, and that doesn't seem entirely untrustworthy. They want to
None of
marry
these things
her
are...
to Quentin, and
Right. None of these
be
things are
her-
totally untrustworthy,
The Greyjoy plan is the most untrustworthy, I think, but
Maybe, but
only because he plans on stealing her dragons when, she gets to
But
Iron
if she rides a
Islands.
dragon and he rides a dragon and they work together, I don't know. Yeah, she should treat everyone with a little bit of caution. I agree, but most of these people are here to help her help them.
Yeah, the lion Tyrion, he seems pretty legit, although he's been forced into this existing plan.
Right.
But he's got nothing against her at the moment.
He's got his own motivations, but they happen to align. And that's the thing. A lot of these people's motivations align with Dany's, even if they're not. The only person who genuinely loved Dany just for herself was Jorah.
Right. That's true. That is true.
And Isdal maybe has found the right strategy at last. We got to, bring some former slaves to say, hey, we want this. And now Dany's believing in it. Now Dany wants to think about this. So
yeah,
I think
he really changed tactics. He conformed from an appearance standpoint to something more appeasing to Dany. He shaved his head, which is a sign of support for Dany.
Yeah.
And he provided more than just financial reasons, He showed how the law is affecting the very people that she's trying to protect with this law.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But, the dragons have been somewhat abandoned here in the darkness of the pyramid in a lot of ways, and we just don't know how that's going to impact them.
Yeah. But we're definitely worried for them. And
it doesn't seem very healthy for growing dragons to be chained and, hidden in the dark. And it doesn't seem sustainable. And the most dangerous one is out in the world. And like we said at the very beginning, she possibly bought Hosea's father's silence. But how many more people's silences is she going to need to buy if this is the plan going forward?
All right. Next time we have a mysteriously named POV, Reek. Those of us who've read this before are very excited because we do know who Reek is.
We have heard the name Reek before, but it's been a long time.
That's right. We have heard of Reek before, yes.
Yeah, but we were led to believe Reek died, so...
Reek did die, yeah. How about that?
We'll see.
Anyway, there's 3 ways that you can help us. You could leave us a 5-star rating and a review. Again, if you leave us a review, we'll read it out, unless you really hate our guts. We probably
right, that just... Keep it to yourself, please.
Yeah. Don't even leave that review. You can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhall. There you can join us at any of the various sustainer levels. There's a tier to match your budget and interest, and the upper tiers get you the spoilers. Or you can make a donation directly to our cause at our website, ghostsofharrenhall.buzzsprout.com.
And if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, well, one way you can do it is you can send us a text. The link to do so is at the top of every episode's show notes. And if you're looking for more ways to keep up on the latest Ghosts of Harrenhal news and developments, well, I would recommend you check us out on our social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Ghost Harrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, where we always have a lot of fun, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.